Hello and welcome to today's webinar, How to Streamline Government Contractor Invoicing Using SharePoint. Couple of housekeeping items before we get started. You're welcome to submit questions at any time using the chat window on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll address them during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. If we don't manage to answer all of your questions, someone will follow up with you via email, and we'll make a recording of the webcast available to you in a couple of days. It's my pleasure to introduce you to today's speakers, Kurt Greening, Director of Productivity Solutions at Xgility, and David Lavenda, VP of Product Strategy at Harmony. Kurt is the Director of Product Solutions at Xgility. He leads a team focused on the needs of government and defense contractors. His expertise includes leadership, team building, and business productivity. In addition, his technology experience includes cloud technologies, SharePoint, Office 365, and other disruptive technologies, and he's the co-organizer of the Reston SharePoint user group. David is the Vice President of Product Strategy at Harmony. He's a frequent contributor to leading press outlets on the topic of information overload in organizations, which is the focus of his research. David is an international scholar for the Society for the History of Technology. Kurt, please get us started.
Thank you for that introduction. So just to give a quick introduction of Xgility and why we are on this webinar, Xgility actually has 4 practice areas. The first practice area is our enterprise collaboration and workflow area, of which we'll be talking about a solution particularly aimed in that area. Our team also does a lot of Office 365 enablement and adoption. The third area of our practice is application modernization, and that's a lot of legacy applications that might exist on Unix systems or Oracle databases and making them cloud ready. And then finally, enterprise cloud infrastructure, which includes our security practice. Our tagline is achieve transformational results, and all the solutions that we develop are designed to help our customers become more effective and achieve transformational results in their business. Some of the places that we've served include many of the biggest government agencies. Today we're going to be focusing on a solution specific to government contractors, which are probably the second largest group of customers, but we also serve some associations, professional services firms, and many of the Fortune 500. All right, so the areas of our focus certainly are all around SharePoint, Office 365, and Azure. Security is becoming more important, but all the solutions that we design that we work with are designed to make people more effective and efficient in their business. SharePoint's probably the biggest application that we work with. Of course, we're seeing many folks move into Office 365, which causes us to use a lot of technologies in Azure to try to bring the customizations in SharePoint that most of our customers are using. Of course, with the cloud, folks are very concerned about security, and we've brought in a lot of new tools around identity management in the cloud, information protection, data loss prevention, and especially in the government contractor space, trying to comply with DoD and NIST 800 standards, multi-factor authentication has become really something critical with collaboration platforms. All right, great. I think we've got another polling question here. So polling question, what version of SharePoint do your organization have? Hopefully there's not too many more left on SharePoint 2007. We deal with a lot of government agencies, and there are still folks on 2007. It's pretty much become a mandate to get off of 2003 server, which a lot of the folks that are still running 2007 are still running. Probably costing you a pretty penny from support if you're still there. Oh, cool. We have some people running SharePoint 2016. And wow, actually the predominance of people running Office 365. All right, cool. Looks like most everybody has had a chance to vote. So we'll move on. Perfect. So just wanted to give you a quick overview of the solutions that we've developed for government contractors. These are actually examples of solution accelerators that the team of experts of Xgility have developed specifically for government contractors. And you can kind of see on the left side as you go down the departments that are represented in terms of those solutions. Everybody from business development to contracts to the subcontracts team, finance, human resources, and then finally program management. And then if you can kind of see on the top, you can get an idea of where those solutions exist in the contract's lifecycle. Everything from opportunity identification to making the bid decision and developing a proposal, award, performing on those contracts, and then finally contracts closeout. So these particular solutions are not products that you can download, but essentially our design is templates and solution accelerators that many of our customers use to more quickly adopt SharePoint for government contractors. Okay, great. So today's solution that we're going to be talking about is really specific to the finance organization and the invoice approval process. So I want to give you a little bit of a case study. This is actually pretty similar to many of the customers that I've experienced. But I want to give you a case study on one that was both a minority-owned business as well as a service-disabled veteran-owned business. And as a result, that organization grew extremely rapidly. So when they were a small organization, essentially their idea was to set up a distribution list, and it was invoices at theircompany.com. And when the company was small, there was 2 people in the back office, and they were owners of the organization, and they were mostly subcontractors, but did have 1 or 2 prime contracts. Fast forward to when we developed this solution, the company had grown rapidly. The company had approximately 600 people, as well as many subcontractors. This particular distribution list was received by 29 people, and that includes the accounts payable folks, that included the executives, and that included the program managers. And the result was really too much email. I don't think anybody enjoys the amount of email that they get. And also unhappy subcontractors, so much so that some of their subcontractors were threatening to go to the contracting officers and state that they weren't being paid, and some of them even threatened to stop work. And really the challenge was just trying to figure out, were invoices ready to pay? Were they overpaying people? And they really had no dashboard or way of tracking this. And trying to track that in an email with reply to all and figure out the latest thread in the reply, unfortunately, was just not working for them. So in this particular case, they came to us asking for what solutions might be available. And that particular organization did have access to Office 365 as well as SharePoint Online. And what we're going to show you today is their online invoice library. We're not going to show you all the features of it just from a time, but we're going to show you a couple of things. So what's cool about the library is it's been configured with an approval workflow. That approval workflow goes to the program manager that's designated. And of course, then once the program manager approves, then the folks in accounts payable know that it's time to pay that invoice. We're also going to show you a quick dashboard, and the items in the dashboard are things that are waiting for approval, invoices that are past due, and alerts. And of course, the advantage of this solution is that there's less email and happier subcontractors, and also happier executives and accounts payable team that can now easily manage and track where they are with invoices approvals. And then the last thing that we're going to show you is tight integration with Outlook. So with that, Alex, could you bring up our invoice library, please? Okay, great. So here we have our invoice approval library. I'm not sure how much everybody's worked with SharePoint, but if you haven't worked with SharePoint, you're not really a power user of SharePoint, you should be familiar at least with the idea of uploading documents into a document library. But what might be a little bit different for you is that we have metadata on the document library, and you can kind of see the top there, the contract, the subcontractor name, the dollar amount, the due date, modified, as well as the program manager. And probably one of the most important fields here is the program manager, because we're actually going to use that field in the notification workflow. Now, of course, the folks that are going to be using this particular solution, they're actually not in accounts payable, and they're not in program management. They're just basically admin staff that are monitoring this distribution list and taking the files that come into that distribution list and uploading it to this particular document library. So anybody that's maybe new to SharePoint, Alex, could you just give them an idea of the traditional way that people upload documents to a document library? So in this case, Alex is going to be browsing to a file from the invoice. And what most people would do is they would take that particular email that came in with the invoice, save it to someplace on their computer, and then click on the upload button. So Alex, go ahead and click on the upload button and show them what it's going to prompt them for in terms of filling out metadata fields.
So once you click on the upload button, then you have to go look through your file explorer, find the file, and then you're going to click open. And that's going to manually upload it up into the document library here.
Okay, great. So in this particular case, we don't yet have the information in terms of the metadata that we need. But Alex, why don't you go ahead and delete that, and we're going to show folks how to do that in an easier way in a little bit. All right, great. The second thing that I wanted to show you was a separate list of all of our contracts. And so most of our government contractor folks will have a contracts management system. In this particular case, we just gave you a simplistic example of a contracts management system because we wanted to be able to pull the program manager values from the contracts number. And so when we show you in our other view how to select the contract name, that will automatically select who the program manager is, so that the administrative assistants, they really don't need to know who the program managers are. All they need to know is they look at the invoice, they see the contract number, and by selecting that contract number upon upload, they're going to be able to automatically start the workflow that will notify the program manager via email. So Alex, why don't you move over to Outlook? Probably the #1 complaint, or maybe #2 complaint that I get from SharePoint, probably #1 being things are hard to find in SharePoint because people don't have a great information architecture. #2 complaint is that folks feel like SharePoint is hard to use, kind of used to working with file shares, and might not be as used to working with things in the web browser. And so when we showed you how people traditionally upload files to SharePoint, some of the users, especially administrative staff, they might not be as happy with having to use that method to upload documents into our invoice approval library. So in this particular case, these clerks that use this solution, they don't live in SharePoint all day. This is essentially one of the main areas that they use on SharePoint. And so in this particular case, you can see what it would be like to get an invoice in from an email distribution list. One of the things you're going to see that's a little different from the traditional Outlook is that you've got a plugin for the Harmony tool on the right. And so what's really cool about that is that we've connected that Harmony tool basically by putting in the URL of that document library. And Alex is going to show you how easy it is to drag and drop that particular invoice into the document library and then tag it with the metadata fields that we need, including the contract number, to allow our notifications to happen.
So all you have to do is simply click and drag that attachment over to that invoices document library, let go, and then it's going to have you fill out some information such as subcontractor name, dollar amount, the due date.
Of course, our due date is going to become really important when we look at our 3 dashboards, which are the invoices that are approved that are past due. And of course, we put together our contract number, which is going to notify our program manager. So go ahead and hit save. Of course, you'll see that that's much easier than the previous way of uploading because we never had to leave Outlook. And then Alex, if you can show us our last 2 things, which are our two views, the items that are waiting on approval, as well as the invoices that are past due. And then I'm going to turn it over to Dave for just a few minutes after we show those 2 things so that you can see a few more features and know a little bit more about the capabilities of the tools at Harmony beyond this particular plugin. So Alex, if you could just quickly show us our 2 views here. So our first view would be invoices that are past due. Could you click on that and show us the invoices that are past due? Okay, so we're in a little bit of trouble. We got some invoices that are past due and we need to take some actions. And how about the invoices that are waiting on approval? So we'll see if our program managers have some jobs to do. So in this particular case, we've solved the problem of what's the status of my invoice. If a executive gets called, they don't have to try to search through 300 emails to try to figure out where we are. They can simply see, yep, your invoice is past due. We're sorry, we'll address that. And yes, I can see the problem. My program manager has not approved your invoice, so we'll reach out to your program manager to make that happen. So I want to thank you for your time today. I'm going to turn it over to Dave. This really only scratches the surface with some of the capabilities of the Harmony tools, but you can see how it really makes things easier and it will really make folks more productive from the standpoint of managing the invoice approval process.
Okay, thank you, Kurt and Alex, for that really informational demo of the process, including the Harmony product. And you know, I think there's what I'd like to do is also share a little bit of information about not only this particular use case, but share some information where Harmony makes it very easy to not only be compliant with requirements, SharePoint-based project initiatives, but also focus in on some of the key elements that are necessary to ensure the success of those initiatives. So what, studies and surveys routinely show that one of the top reasons for SharePoint-based information governance or compliance initiatives failing is really one of is the fact that people just can't use SharePoint. It's very difficult to, as you saw in some of these, even uploading a document requires multiple steps. If you want to upload an email, it becomes even much more complicated, as you saw, to say nothing about adding metadata. And well, those steps might be okay for sophisticated IT users. Business users really don't want to focus on using the tools. They just want to focus on getting their job done. And when you introduce all those steps, what folks end up doing is trying to circumvent the prescribed method of working through SharePoint and start sending things like attachments through email. They start going back to the old methods, which we saw at the beginning really don't work, particularly when you scale to beyond a certain size, when you got many people who have to work together on a project and distribution lists and those kind of things just fail miserably. So really the 2 elements associated with the human experience of these business initiatives. So as I said before, one of them is people going back to using attachments to collaborate, and that's almost over 3/4 of people end up doing that, even when SharePoint is installed. Just can't get usage of it. And even if you can get usage of it, very often SharePoint becomes a document graveyard because people treat it like they do a shared drive when they just store things in different files, cryptic names. You send out a document, you get one back, it has a different name, it's actually just another version of the same document, there's no way to correlate the two, and you end up with the document chaos that you have in the shared drives, not taking advantage of all the great capabilities for version control that SharePoint provides. So those are two main reasons that these projects typically fail. Slide, please. And the way to deal with that is really dealing with what we call the last mile of information governance. So you can, and by humanizing that and making it easy for people to do the right thing, this is really the key to the success of the project. So you can define your best policies, you can do a great job of taxonomy with all your metadata, and even setting up automation through things like approval chains for approving emails and documents. But if you don't actually get the emails and the documents into the system, the initiative won't work. And that's why the user experience for typical business users is critical, making it easy for them to do the right thing so they don't have to learn new work habits. That's exactly what they need to do. Slide, please. So what do you need to do to solve this last mile problem, this being able to get things into the system properly so it can be found later on? So actually there's call them the 4 C's of putting the human at the center of the initiative. One of them is making it easy to capture documents in email in SharePoint, and Alex showed us how that was done just by literally dragging them from Outlook into SharePoint without having to go switch windows. We know that switching applications and toggling between windows, this context switching, is not only cognitively taxing, but it also just pushes people out and becomes too complicated, and they don't want to be bothered doing that. So capturing documents is key, but not only capturing them, they have to be classified, categorized properly through the use of metadata, and we saw how an example of how we make it easy for people to specify the metadata without having them to start typing in fields or going through a whole series of drop-down boxes in document by document. The third C is to be able to claim or to find these documents, to easily retrieve them. Certainly in a lot of cases you often have things like audits, or you have discovery, where you need to be able to provide and find these documents. Certainly one very popular case that we run into often is things like freedom of information, for that government agencies need to be receptive to and be able to find things quickly and to be able to supply those documents and emails quickly. And the only way to do that is if they're accurately classified and handled in a way that makes it easy for people to find them quickly. And lastly, the last C is collaboration, and that's all about working through work processes like things like invoicing, or things like project management, knowledge management, dealing with, again, freedom of information. It typically involves many people who need to touch documents and emails. So making it easier for people to share information, using all the great capabilities that SharePoint has, is really the key to solving the last mile problem and humanizing the experience of the technology so that the business initiative can be successful. Slide, please. So Harmony solves this problem by making what we say is making the right thing the easy thing to do. And the way we humanize information governance is really through four key points. So as you saw in the demo, one is through working in email. So people continue to spend their day, despite all the doomsayers about email going away. We know that email usage is actually going up. So people continue to spend their day in email. It's clearly the place to enable folks to get their work done with SharePoint and with other Microsoft tools, and without having to toggle between windows. So that's key to getting people, business people, on board. Being able to classify using metadata effortlessly, as we just showed, that is key. Making that easy, because there's this, what we usually call this 5-second rule, where if people can't complete the task in 5 seconds, they'll just do something else. They'll just go back to what's easy. So by making prompting people to fill in the metadata and select from fields, it makes it super simple. 3 is treating emails as documents of record. I mean, one thing today, it's absolutely clear that many of the documents, or many of the records that we have in organizations today, are emails. So I mean, just as a simple example, if I send an invoice or I send a proposal to a company, I could do it one of 2 ways. One is I can just put the text in an email with all the conditions, and then that person would reply to me and say they accept or don't accept the terms, or I could attach a document with the proposal in the email. So it doesn't make sense that in one case the document would get stored in SharePoint, whereas the email would get stored in my my private Exchange folder, inaccessible to the rest of my colleagues. So it's very important to treat emails as documents of records, get those into a central repository like SharePoint, classified so they can be found, because today, in actuality, there's really no difference from a business perspective between an email message and a document. And lastly, be able to access and work offline, because it's not always are people able to be tethered to a desk. Sometimes there's a need to be able to work when not connected to network, or when the network is not available, whether they're still working from their desktop computer or also sometimes from mobile devices. So being able to work and continue to work 24/7 if necessary is key, even if you don't have the necessary network resources. Slide, please. So Harmony provides several different products that allow you, or it's a suite of products that allow you to fulfill all these requirements of humanizing the information governance workflow. We just saw a demonstration of the desktop product. That's Harmony for Outlook. That's what you see here, dragging and dropping between email and SharePoint. So making it easy to capture, classify documents, and share them right from the desktop where you're continuously working. Next slide, please. There's also a Harmony Outlook web app, which is a plug-in to the Office, the Outlook web app. There is actually just released in the last couple of weeks a version of this also that runs as a sidebar, not only in email, but also in documents. Our philosophy is clearly to be present in the places where people are already spending their work time, so that is email, but it's also often documents, and now there's a version that runs as an adjunct to your documents. This is a product that won a Office App Award from Microsoft in 2016, and we're very proud of this additional capability, as it takes advantage of a lot of the new Office 365 capabilities. Next slide, please. Business users, though, are increasingly on the go. So Harmony also has a complete Office 365 SharePoint experience for all mobile operating systems, and business users can continue to collaborate when they're not in the office. Harmony partners with all the leading MDM vendors, the mobile device management vendors, to deliver secure and containerized online and offline experiences. So if you use any of these products like Mobile Iron or AirWatch, Good, Citrix, IBM, and so on, you can be assured that the documents can be accessed offline or offline, working with the metadata, editing PDF files, even uploading photos to SharePoint. We have a number of government agencies who do this, who need to upload photos from things like a phone or an iPad and get them into SharePoint and catalog so they can become part of documents of record. Slide, please. Maybe a few words about the Harmony, the company. We've got about 1,200 enterprise customers, about 1.8 million users. We also announced last week that we have surpassed the 60 million link goal of or mark of helping organizations replace over 60 million attachments with links. So we're proud of that. We're also proud of last week winning the Microsoft Partner Finalist of the Year for Content and Collaboration, which is the latest of the Microsoft awards that we have continually won over the last 4 years, both Partner of the Year, Office App Awards, and of course being a very close Microsoft Gold Certified ISV partner. So Microsoft clearly sees that driving adoption and usage is a key component for making their solutions successful, which is why they recognize us every year for helping their clients achieve this and be successful with their business initiatives. Slide, please. Harmony also has a wide variety of, or serves a wide variety of both vertical customers and also business initiatives, all things from whether it's SharePoint adoption, collaboration projects, information governance, compliance with regulatory or with industry requirements, records management, ECM, digital workplace. We'd be happy to discuss with you any of the experience, the wide range of experience that we have working with companies to complete a very broad set of business requirements that are all based on using SharePoint and Outlook to complete the business requirements. Next slide, please. So I'm going to turn it back over to Susan.
I'm going to entertain a couple of questions. Kurt, one question I see is, does this solution apply to industries other than government contractors?
Great question. So invoice approval solutions obviously would apply to in industries outside of government contracting. This particular use case, the fast growth, was specific to the challenges that I see in a lot of government contractors that maybe meet a special socioeconomic category, and the fast-growing natures of a lot of their business, and moving from 2 to 50 people in the back office sometimes in less than a year of 18 months. So yeah, thank you for that question. Solutions like this would apply to other industries.
Thank you. The next question I see is, can you create other views in your dashboard?
Absolutely. SharePoint's pretty customizable, and so one of the main purposes of creating metadata is to create other views. Out on Xgility's YouTube channel, we have an example of somebody who has done contracts management in SharePoint, and that particular example was a nonprofit. And so they wanted to create views of multiple things. So I believe one of the views that they wanted to create was, give me contracts in this particular department with a value over X. So that's an example of views. It's pretty configurable what kind of views you can create for your dashboard within a SharePoint list or library.
Great. I'd like to keep this short so that we can all gain some extra time. So if we haven't answered your question, we'll get in touch with you after the webinar and someone will answer it for you. Kurt, David, I'd like to thank you for that great presentation. And thank you all for joining us today. You'll receive a link to view the webinar within a couple of days. And we look forward to meeting you again at our next webinar.